Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Leroy Fleming, and I want to welcome everybody here to the Melrose Room. We are here today because, number one, we're celebrating Martin Luther King's birthday, and I'm so excited that the Melrose Room and Winnie invited me out to make sure that I can speak on a grand occasion for a marvelous man. My topic for everybody today is titled AA&E. And I know you're wondering what AA&E actually stands for. Well, what I'm going to do, I'm going to tell a series of stories about 5 people. The first person I'm going to speak about is going to be Will Smith. Everybody knows Will Smith, correct? I know. We're going to talk about Napoleon Hill, who wrote one of the greatest books of all mankind in terms of self-motivation and starting a business and doing a lot of great work. Then I'm going to talk about the one and only master motivator, Mr. Les Brown. If you have not heard of Mr. Les Brown, he is a motivational speaker that's been doing this for over 40 plus years, and it's worth me telling a story about him. And then I'm going to include who? Myself. And when I include myself in the story, I'm going to tell you my theory for motivation and how I got to be the person that I am. And last but not least, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to talk about the man Martin Luther King and what he means not only to me, but to society and ultimately to the world. So without further ado, I'm just going to start it off by saying AA&E. The first letter in AA&E means to acknowledge. Acknowledge simply means that your mindset gives you a frame of reference of something that you would want to do in life. These are just your visions and your memories that you have that you want to make the best of, but they're running around in your head and you don't quite know how to extract them. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if they're still running around in your head now, that means that you have acknowledged the fact that you do have a dream or a goal. Can we agree on that? All right. The next step is to affirm. Affirm means that you're going to take the vision that you have and you're going to start writing out concrete examples of what it means. If you have a dream of wanting to learn how to drive a car, you see it in your mind. So what are the steps to driving a car? When you start to affirm those steps, then you have a visual and a concrete example of what it takes to accomplish that. The last step, which is the most important step in your whole life, no matter what anybody tells you. You can dream all day and you can write your life away. But if you do not execute, you do not have a goal, you do not have a dream. So when you have the AA&E philosophy, what it simply means is to acknowledge, affirm, and then get on the go and make sure that you accomplish that. Does everybody now understand what AA&E is? All right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to start off by seeing whether or not you can see AA&E and all of these people that I'm speaking about. The first person is one of the most popular men in Hollywood, has been that way for a long time, and whenever he talks on Instagram or Facebook, he's always talking about motivation. The man that I'm speaking of, ladies and gentlemen, is Will Smith. And Will Smith tells this story about when he was 12 years old and his brother was 9 years old, and his father knocked down a wall in front of his business, and he took his son to the business and said to them, "I want you to build me a wall." This is a 12-year-old young child and a 9-year-old child, and he tells them, "I want you to build a wall." When Will gives his when Will reminisces about the goal, he said that he never thought about the wall in and of itself. He thought about, I'm going to lay this first brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid. And if I lay every brick as perfectly as a brick can be laid, then ultimately you will have a wall. So it took them about a year and a half, and in that year and a half, they finally built the wall. Now here's what's important. His father came out to them and said, "Don't you ever tell me that there's not anything you can't do." Totally changed his life. Gave him a better perspective, and it made him realize that he could accomplish anything. So when you think about your life, you got to make sure that you lay the thought as perfectly as a thought can be laid. Once you lay the thought, then you got to take the step to make sure that as you're building the wall, that you are executing and accomplishing your goal. If you can just kind of find that focus in your life the same way, then the goal that you want will be accomplished. And Will Smith goes on to say this one last thing. He said that Charlie Rose asked him a question. He said that, "I don't like fear." And Charlie said, "Well, what do you mean by fear?" He said, "I don't like the fear of fear." And Charlie tried to relate it to a thing. But Will said, no, fear is not, the way I look at fear is not related to a thing. It's related to the fact that I don't like not being challenged. I don't like being told that I can't do something. So Will's whole approach is, whatever's in front of me, that's what I'm going to tackle. I have no reason to try to fear anything because it's not attached to anything. And if I accomplish it, then fear shall be eradicated. So you kind of see AA&E and the approach that Will has. All right, so everybody understand Will Smith. The next person is probably the most profound person I think that I've studied in self-development and motivation and just trying to accomplish a dream. And the man that I speak of is Dr. Napoleon Hill. He wrote a book called Think and Grow Rich. Have you all heard it? Heard of it? Yeah. Well, if you have not, then you probably need to go and purchase it and begin to read it so you can see what happened. But I'm going to give you a story so you can kind of see AA&E even when Dr. Hill was approaching his business work. Dr. Hill met a young man by the name of Andrew Carnegie, who at that period of time was the richest man in the world. He called Napoleon Hill to his office, and they sat down for like 30 minutes. And Andrew Carnegie was so interested in Dr. Hill, he said, I want you to come to my house so I can give you this theory more and more so that we can share it with the world. So after 3 days and 3 nights, Dr. Hill was given this task. And Mr. Carnegie said, well, you're the person I want to commission to write this book. But it's going to take you 20 years to write it because that's how long it's going to take. And I want you to give me your answer. So Dr. Hill thought about it for a minute. He said, okay, you want me to write this book, but you don't want to give me any compensation, no money whatsoever? Yeah. So Dr. Hill thought about it, and he said the first thought came to his mind was a negative thought. Like, why are you going to do this when a man that has all the money in the world is not going to pay you? So he thought, and he said, okay. He said, Mr. Carnegie, not only will I write the book, but you can depend on me to complete it. And Mr. Carnegie said, you got the job. So Dr. Hill started writing books and several books, and 19 years into the work, ultimately he started working in the White House. And when he started working in the White House, he was commissioned to come in and try to change, at that time, the Great Depression. He tried to find a way to rearrange the terminology in the newspaper so that people wouldn't be so frantic and go to take their monies out of the bank because they felt like the economy was collapsing. So while he was there, he ended up writing 5 books, ladies and gentlemen, 5 books. And one of them was Think and Grow Rich, which wasn't titled Think and Grow Rich at the time. So he called his publisher over. He said, I want you to look at this book because I think that this book would be a great seller. And his publisher said, okay, I'm going to take this book with me for the weekend. We're going to study the manuscript and we're going to get back to you on the weekend. He was like, okay, fine. So they took the manuscript. They came back. They said, man, we read this book, man, and we think it's going to be a bestseller. He said, I'm going to print you 5,000 copies. Dr. Hill said, no, I don't think you need to do 5,000. I think you probably need to do 20,000. The man said, we ain't never printed 20,000 books for nobody. Dr. Hill said, okay, cool. So when they got to the point where they was ready to publish, his publisher called him back and said, look, Napoleon, you haven't given me a title to this book yet. And if you don't give me a title by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, I'm going to title the book myself. And Dr. Hill said, well, what are you going to title it? He said, well, get your noodle and a caboodle. And Dr. Hill said, no, man, you can't title that book that way. If you title that, you're going to ruin me. So I'll come up with a title. So he said that he wrote down 1,000 titles, and none of them were worth 1 penny. So here's what he did, ladies and gentlemen, and I quote you. He said that he sat on the edge of his bed, and he began to talk to his subconscious mind. Now, how many of you have ever talked to your subconscious mind? Nobody? Well, let me teach you how you do it. He sat on the edge of his bed and he said, now listen here, fella. You brought me out of poverty, you brought me out of ignorance, and you're taking me to places I've never been. But I need to have a title to this book tonight. You hear me? I need to have this title to this book tonight. He did it so loud and for so long, they called the police on him. The police knocked on the door. He lets them in, and the police say, we heard you over here beating your wife. He said, well, if I'm beating my wife, go in there and find her. If you find her, excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, he said, if you find her, then let me know. So he sat them down, and he told them what he had done. And the officer stands up and said, man, this is the craziest story I ever heard. Let me leave. So everybody leaves. Now he lays down at 2 o'clock in the morning. When he lays down at 2 o'clock in the morning, he says he hears a thunderous noise, and it wakes him up out of his sleep. And when he awakened, he had the title of the book. So he called the publisher, and he said, hey, I got the title of the book. And the publisher was like, Roy, he said, but why are you calling me so early in the morning? He said, man, I got that $1 million title for you. He said, let me hear it. He said, Think and Grow Rich. And the publisher said, man, by God, you got a $1 million title on your hands. Once they labeled that book, ladies and gentlemen, Not only did it make him a household name, Dr. Hill became an international success. And his book has sold over 100 million copies to this date, or maybe more. And that just comes from acknowledging something, affirming something, and constantly working on it until you get the desired result of what you want. AA&E. Before I even thought about Dr. Hill, when it came to me, that's what revealed to me. These are the 3 steps that I apply. Now, if you really want to add something to it, I encourage you all to read Think and Grow Rich. When you read Think and Grow Rich, you will see the power of desire and the willingness to accomplish your dreams. That's Dr. Napoleon Hill for you, ladies and gentlemen, one of the most powerful men in American history. The next person, ladies and gentlemen, that I'm going to speak about is, his name is Les Brown. Has anybody ever heard of Les Brown? Anybody? Yeah, I know, right? Very popular guy. Well, Mr. Les Brown was born in an abandoned building by his biological mother. He was given to his adopted mother, Miss Mamie Brown, who raised him in Liberty City in Miami, Florida. Well, Mr. Brown, as he began to age, everybody labeled him mentally, educationally retarded, and they put him in classes that they thought was suited for who he was. But for some reason, Mr. Brown never really paid attention to that. He had this dream, and his overall dream was to buy his mother a home. Has any of you ever had a dream of wanting to do something so amazing for your mother that it became a burning desire, it was something that you wanted to achieve? Well, Mr. Brown had got up and he had become a very successful speaker. And when he became a successful speaker, he started making money. So when he made about $12,000 or so, he took that money and he went and paid down on a house for his mother. A dream accomplished, right? You see? It's accomplished. But there was one hiccup. When he paid the $12,000 and he moved his mother into this home, he get a call from the bank telling him that they need the other thousands and thousands of dollars so that he can remain in the house. And Mr. Brown was like, "What? Why do you need more money? I just gave you everything that I had." No less, they need all the money to the house in a couple of days. If you don't have it in a couple of days, you're going to have to vacate the premises. He said, "Are you serious? I got to leave the house after I gave this guy all of my money, and I got to go tell my mom I got to move her out of the house, the very house that I put her in?" Ladies and gentlemen, his spirit was broken. He went to his mom and he told her, "Mom, we got to go." And she said, "But why, baby? Just some things that didn't come out right and we got to move." And she said, "That's okay, baby. I don't mind going back." So he moves her back into the place that he had left. Now his dream, the acknowledgement, the affirming, and execution had come to pass. However, there was a hiccup because he found out that the house had a lien on it. And when you have a lien on it, if you don't investigate it, then you come to find out that you can lose your investment. So rule number 1 to anybody to get a home, make sure you check with everybody, make sure there's not a lien on the property that you want to purchase. Now after that, he sat down for a little bit. He resolved to himself. He said, "Look, now I'm going to go out and speak even more. I'm going to become even more determined so I can get my mom a house so that I don't have to deal with this anymore." So ladies and gentlemen, long version short, Mr. Brown accomplished his goal. He got his mom the house. He moved her out, and the rest of it is history. And Mr. Brown has this saying that I want you all to remember, even when you think about AA&E. When you think about your life, Mr. Brown says this phrase, and I think it's beautiful. He says, "Live full, die empty." Can you guys repeat that after me, please? Live full, die empty. What does that mean? The dreams that you have, the goals that you aspire to, the people that you try to connect to. You want to try to make sure that every day of your life that you're living your maximum potential. So that when you go home at night, you're exhausted from a day of hard, productive mental work. So the day that you pass away, you don't want the world to say, you don't want your family to say, "Oh, he could have, oh, she should have." You want them to say that this person lived full, therefore they died empty, and therefore there's no problem in the world that they have. Ladies and gentlemen, that's Mr. Les Brown. So hopefully you guys are seeing AA&E and all of these people that I'm describing. Now I come to myself, where I tried to have AA&E. AA&E did not come to me right away, ladies and gentlemen. It just came to me maybe like 4 or 5 months ago. But I'm going to give you the journey so you can understand what AA&E means to me. I, like Mr. Brown, had a dream as well. I wanted to buy my mom that luxurious house. I wanted her to have the fine clothes. I wanted her to have the nice car. I wanted her to see what her son was out here really trying to do in the world, the impact that he has. So when I graduated from Central High School in Phoenix City, Alabama, I then went to college at Alabama State University in Montgomery, Alabama, the home of the Civil Rights Movement and the place where Martin Luther King got his start. Purely coincidental, right? That's why Melrose had this event for me, because they wanted me to explain to you where I was and how I got to be where I am. When I entered Alabama State University, ladies and gentlemen, my mind was not a mind of superior thinking. I come from a place where people don't recognize you if you don't have all A's and B's. I was like a C or D student, so I was right in the middle of a cusp of almost being a failure or completely falling out. But that was a drive, right? When you have a drive, it drives you past the conditions that you have. The number one drive that I had, ladies and gentlemen, is that I wanted to finish college, and I wanted my mom to see me finish college so she could say, look at what my son has done. But I had this little tingling inside of me, right? So when I got there, my initial plan was to go over to the theater department and to become an actor. The reason I wanted to be an actor is because in my whole being, that's what I felt I was. That's what I felt I could do. But in my mind, here's what I heard. You need to get a degree, so if something doesn't work for you, you will have this to fall back on. So my plan A and my plan B, they collided. So I got a degree in business. But prior to my exit at Alabama State University, ladies and gentlemen, I went over to that theater department. I participated in a few plays. I took a few acting classes. And the teacher that was there, her name was Dr. Tania Stewart. She played in The Heat of the Night, and she was also in Mississippi Burning. She sat me down, just her and I in the room. She said, Fleming, that's what she called me, Fleming. She said that you got the ability to be an actor. It's just going to take a lot of hard work and determination. Now, she really fed my spirit when she did that. So graduation day comes, my mom is out in the audience, and I'm celebrating because now I get to go from the kid that they think that couldn't graduate from high school, who didn't have the ability to finish college. He just started walking across the stage, right? You don't walk across the stage, right? You shake the guy's hand, and they give you that in which you work for. Now, when it was over with, I took my mom back to the place that I was living, and I took my college degree. It didn't mean anything to me, but it meant the world to her. So I said to her, Mom, this is for you. She starts to cry, right? But I'm a man, look, you can't cry in front of me, so I slightly turn away, and she says to me, I am so proud of you. But that wasn't my dream, ultimately. So I turned to her and I said, this is for you, but I have more work I have to do. Because now the dream is taking hold. I finished one stage of it. She said, okay, fine. Long story short, I come to Florida because number one, the weather in Florida is beautiful. It agrees with my body, my makeup, and my whole DNA. And when I got here, my goal was to become a successful actor. Well, January the 1st, 2000, she's no longer on the planet. Everything that I dreamed of, everything that I've thought about has now been eradicated. Now, does my dream still live, or does the physical side of me kill the dream because now the dream doesn't make any sense? And I say that to you guys, young people alike. When you have a dream, if you love the dream enough, you have to pursue it from the time you think about it until its ultimate conclusion. If you attach it to somebody, you make it that much more stronger. And you have to accomplish it, because if the person you attach it to is no longer there, then what does the dream mean? This is my mother. So she's gone now. Does this dream really mean anything to me now? And the answer is, no, it does not, right? It can't mean, it can't have any value, right? Now, for 6 months, I walked around in a stupor. I knew the sun was shining. I knew I had friends, I had family, but none of it made any sense. So one day, I was in my home, and I said, and I quote to this day the exact words, I said, God, if you do not help me with this, I don't think that I'm going to make it. And as soon as I said that, something told me to take a pen, sit down and write, just like I'm talking to you now. Sit down and write. Ladies and gentlemen, I took the pen, I sat down, and I'm not even a poet, I'm not even a writer. So the very first piece that I wrote was titled, Here We Go. That's how it starts off. And then it goes all the way through this stanza. So now as I'm writing, what you're going to really understand is when you write something, you take it out of the mental state and you put it in the physical state. Therefore, you are depleting your mind of negative, positive energy or whatever it is. It relieves pressure from the brain. And I didn't know this because as I'm starting writing, I'm writing all times of the day and night, like 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the evening, 8 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock. And I don't even know why my brain is doing this to me. But to this day, I can stand right here and tell you, I know what it was doing to me. It was showing me not only are you valuable, the dream that you have for your mother is valuable, just the life that you live is valuable. You have to attach value to everything that you do. To this day, I have published 10 books, and I'm working on book number 15. And my goal is to get to book number 16 because that's a promise not only that I made to my mom, but a promise to the general universe that I will complete this series. And when you get to the end of something, it's very difficult because the response is not as great. So why did I tell you this? My mom was my true inspiration, so she's gone. But then when you look at life, life is the ultimate inspiration. When you look at life, you look at everything that goes up or down, and you have to control that as best you can to get you to what your goal is. So I didn't accomplish my AA&E when my mother was here, which is still a downer for me, but I know I have to continue to work because that's what I promised her. AA&E, that's the theory that I work on. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to end it by talking about the man that Winnie invited me to speak about, and that is Dr. Martin Luther King. And when I started thinking about Dr. Martin Luther King, I started listening to all the speeches that he had, but the one that I was trying to find was the one that everybody played these snippets of. I don't know if you ever heard this speech where he said, if I would have sneezed, I wouldn't have been here. So I heard that snippet, I was like, man, that's powerful, but where is that? And then I heard about the part where he said that we are the people that get to the promised land. You guys ever heard that part? I might not get there with you, but we are the people that will get to the promised land. And I heard that snippet, I'm like, well, where did that come from? So 2 months ago, I was on YouTube, and you can go to YouTube and do all this stuff, by the way. And then he had the one called The Mountaintop. And I started playing The Mountaintop. So I listened to it all the way through, and I said, everything that I wanted was in this one speech. After all these years, I finally found it. But all of that didn't even matter to me. Here's what was important, and this is what I want to leave you guys with so you can think about your life and yourself. When the speech comes on, Dr. King says that if he was standing at the beginning of time and the Creator asked him, Martin, what era would you like to live in? So Martin said that I would take a mental trip through Egypt, and I would see that all the things that the Egyptians did, they spread far and wide throughout the world. And then he said, but I wouldn't stop there. So now that piqued my interest. And then he said I would go to Greece. He said I would go to Greece and I would go to Mount Olympus. And he says I would listen to the 5 philosophers, and he gives their name, by the way. I don't want to give you the names. I want you to go and listen to it and you can get their names. But Plato is one of them. He said that I would listen to them philosophers talk about the principles of life, but then he said I wouldn't stop there. Then he said that he would go to Rome and see all the amazing things that the Roman Empire set up. And then he said, and I wouldn't stop there. Fast forward. Then he said, I would go to 1863 and I would see Abraham Lincoln sign the Emancipation Proclamation. And he said, I wouldn't stop there. He said he would go to the 1930s and he would listen to the president say that we have nothing to fear but fear itself. And then he said, I wouldn't stop there. But then he said, if the Creator would permit me, he said, I would like to have the Creator let me have to see the latter part of the 20th century, because in the 20th century, I know that human beings are going to do an amazing thing. So here's my question to you, ladies and gentlemen. What time do you want to live in? If you were given a chance, because Dr. Martin Luther King was a reverend. So when you talk about a reverend, then a reverend has to associate his existence with God in order for his life to make sense. So if you're standing at the beginning of time, where would you like to live? And the reason Martin didn't want to stay in those other eras, ladies and gentlemen, I believe, It's because they had already done what they needed to do. There was nothing could be done. But where he was, he felt that if he stayed there and did what he needed to do, then the world in which he lived in, he could make it a better place. So I ask each and every one of you, when you think about AA&E, think about your place in the world. Think about, are you living in the time period that you're supposed to live in to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish? If you can do that, then when you wake up every morning, then the energy that you have, you feed it to the universe, and then you go after the things that you want, which is to acknowledge your dreams. Then you got to write down the things that you want, which means to affirm your dream. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Tony Robbins says it's more clear than anything. If you do not execute, then you do not have a dream, and you do not have the steps. Therefore, you're going to bump into a wall every single time. If you don't move, you stay stuck in the same groove. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Leroy Fleming, and this is my AA&E approach to life, and I hope that it has made your life more productive. I hope that you become inspired by these men, but most of all, I hope that you become inspired with your own life. Thank you, and have a great night.
That's good. I'm gonna, should I stop it?
Yeah.